Did Ryan Reynolds allow Blake Lively's entire reputation to be destroyed while protecting his own?
Blake Lively genuinely believed she'd come out the other side of this mess looking like the woman Hollywood misjudged, the one who stood her ground and won. But the more this saga plays out publicly, the more it deserves a closer look, because there's now a real conversation happening online about whether Ryan Reynolds spent this entire ordeal shielding his own reputation while Blake was left standing alone in the blast zone. Once you actually listen to this PR analyst break down what happened, the whole narrative starts to shift. Crisis communications specialist Molly McPherson, who arguably reads Hollywood spin better than anyone currently posting about it, put together a sprawling breakdown of everything tied to the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni saga. And by her read, the real headline here might not be Baldoni at all anymore. It might be her husband. Before we get to Ryan, though, let's sit with Blake for a second, because this rebrand attempt is not going the way her camp clearly hoped. She recently showed up to a major Fendi event in Manhattan, practically radiating an "I'm back" and beloved energy, complete with a fitted couture look, a camera-ready grin, wall-to-wall photographers, and the kind of glossy magazine treatment usually reserved for a full-image relaunch. It had all the hallmarks of a machine working overtime to convince the public that she's still that beloved Gossip Girl style icon everyone once couldn't get enough of. The internet, though, was having none of it. The replies underneath nearly every post turned savage almost instantly. Wherever her image surfaced, the responses piled up fast. Comments siding openly with Baldoni, people telling her to read the room, others pointing out that she quietly closed out a legal fight without ever actually demonstrating her claims in front of a jury. And that's really the sticking point nobody can smooth over. She filed a major lawsuit. The story dominated headlines for the better part of a year. Her camp kept the coverage running non-stop, and parts of the coverage made Baldoni's career look increasingly vulnerable. Then, out of nowhere, it just ended in a settlement. No press conference, no dramatic courtroom win, no smoking gun evidence unveiled for the cameras. What came out afterward made things even messier for her image. Variety and Rolling Stone both reported that no money actually changed hands between the two of them in that deal. That detail alone is a huge reason so many people online refuse to treat this as a decisive victory, no matter how her representatives try to spin it. Fans and critics alike caught on fast, which is exactly why this glamour comeback era feels so tone-deaf to a lot of viewers. Every red carpet appearance just drags the whole scandal back into the conversation instead of letting it fade. If anything, the current PR push seems to be reviving the very controversy it's supposedly trying to bury. This is essentially the exact territory Molly McPherson dug into in her viral video. By her own account, McPherson pulled from media monitoring tools and ran sentiment tracking across what she described as a database of more than 22,000 articles connected to the entire saga, spanning traditional news outlets, podcast transcripts, entertainment blogs, and social chatter. That figure comes straight from her own analysis.
22,000 articles tracked across the case. Sentiment-weighted coverage on Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni from the start of the press tour through the Met Gala this month. The plaintiff in this case, the person who filed the lawsuit, has the worst coverage of all three. The person who sued has worse sentiment numbers than the person she sued. That is not PR strategy working. That is strategy collapsing in real time.
Still, the results she presented were striking. Among the three central figures, Lively, Reynolds, and Baldoni, she reported that Blake came out with the worst public sentiment score by a wide margin. Sit with that for a moment. By McPherson's numbers, the person who initiated the legal action ended up viewed more negatively than the man she took to court. McPherson's interpretation wasn't that the strategy worked, it was that it was actively falling apart in front of everyone watching. And then came the part of her analysis that made people rewind the clip. She explained that when you map out the media word clouds tied to each individual, Reynolds' name barely gets linked to the lawsuit at all. His press coverage, according to her breakdown, still leans heavily on Deadpool, his soccer club in Wrexham, banter with Hugh Jackman, lighthearted interviews, and his identity as a savvy entrepreneur. Blake's coverage, by her account, reads almost entirely as courtroom drama. Lawsuit, controversy, fallout, settlement, disappointment, on loop. Same household, same scandal. Wildly different reputational outcomes, at least according to McPherson's dataset. That gap is where McPherson's theory turns genuinely uncomfortable because she suggests one partner in that marriage was being shielded while the other absorbed nearly all of the public damage alone. Once that idea took hold online, commenters started re-examining Ryan's conduct throughout the whole saga with a much more skeptical eye. According to some reports, Reynolds appears to have stepped into the situation at points where doing so worked in his favor. Leaked messages allegedly placed him in discussions behind the scenes. Other accounts, still unverified, suggested he leaned on talent agencies connected to the project or was involved in key calls. What's harder to dispute is the pattern McPherson pointed to in public appearances. Whenever public outrage actually spiked, whenever Blake was getting torn apart across social platforms, McPherson noted that Ryan tended to be absent at exactly the moments many viewers expected a supportive spouse to show up. She zeroed in on what she considers the single clearest example in this entire timeline, the Met Gala. Here's what's actually documented. Deadline and ABC News both reported that the settlement landed on the same day as this year's Met Gala coverage, and that Ryan was not photographed publicly beside Blake that night. What's interpretation is McPherson's read that the timing and his absence carry meaning. Other commentators online have run with that same reading. What's genuinely unknown and worth being upfront about is whether any of it was planned that way at all. Nobody, including McPherson, has confirmed intent on either side. Blake spent that evening doing glossy magazine-style interviews about resilience and empowerment, refusing to be talked over, leaning fully into the polished messaging her team had clearly prepared. Ryan wasn't standing publicly in her corner during what might be the single most scrutinized stretch of her career to date. He did later share a casual couple's photo online, something some fans took as a quiet gesture of solidarity, though plenty of others online pointed out that a social media post after the fact isn't the same thing as physically standing next to your spouse in public when cameras were actually rolling. According to McPherson, that absence spoke volumes, because in her line of work, where you show up, and when you show up matters just as much as what you say. Ryan staying out of frame while Blake carried the public scrutiny largely solo-raised questions among viewers and commentators alike, particularly since he'd shown no hesitation about being visible earlier on when it suited him. What can be measured, based on the sentiment data McPherson cited, is that Ryan's public image absorbed comparatively little of the fallout, whatever the reason behind that gap turns out to be. Viewed through McPherson's lens, some online have started framing the entire saga less like a straightforward celebrity court case and more like a survival tactic playing out inside a marriage built partly on brand management. That's her interpretation, and it's one a lot of commenters have run with, but it remains a theory rather than a documented fact. McPherson raised another argument that's been circulating heavily since her video dropped. There's a real distinction between chasing publicity and actually managing a crisis, and in her assessment, Blake's team blurred that line about as badly as possible. That particular part of her breakdown landed hard with viewers. Her framing was simple. Racking up headlines, attention, and nonstop coverage is just publicity. Safeguarding someone's reputation for the long haul once the initial storm passes, that's genuine crisis management. An entirely different discipline with entirely different rules. In her view, Blake's team kept optimizing for visibility instead of protecting her image, which she argues explains why nearly every move over these past months has quietly backfired. Every fashion feature, every glossy profile, she's taking her power back headline just kept dragging the lawsuit back into view instead of helping the public forget it, at least by McPherson's read of the coverage patterns. The public was never actually given room to move past it emotionally, based on how the story kept resurfacing. The scandal stayed glued to her name around the clock. Ryan, on the other hand, somehow slipped free of nearly all of that association, according to McPherson's sentiment tracking. And people are increasingly asking whether that's coincidence or design, since his brand never once slowed its momentum through any of this. Deadpool press cycles kept rolling. Wrexham's storylines kept rolling. The witty, quotable interview persona kept rolling right on schedule. McPherson's theory gets even thornier once veteran publicist Leslie Sloan enters her breakdown. For anyone unfamiliar with the industry side of celebrity representation, Sloan is a heavyweight in Hollywood PR circles. According to McPherson, Sloan staying by Blake's side throughout the entire ordeal, rather than stepping back the way publicists sometimes do when a client's situation turns toxic, is itself significant. That reading led McPherson to Reynolds, arguing that he's simply the more valuable Hollywood commodity of the two, and that protecting his image may have been the priority all along. His career footprint is, by any measure, substantial. His business holdings are substantial. His public favorability is substantial. His earning potential across film, sports, and endorsements is substantial. Keeping Ryan's image intact would, in theory, protect the whole financial ecosystem they've built together. From there, viewers online started drawing their own conclusions, because if you trace the pattern McPherson laid out, Blake was repeatedly pushed into the spotlight while Ryan only surfaced selectively, at least according to the coverage she tracked. She became the public face of the scandal. She became the target. She became meme fodder. She became the lightning rod absorbing wave after wave of criticism, while Ryan's name largely stayed out of it. It's a strange thing to sit with, considering how tightly the two have branded themselves as a couple across years of joint appearances and interviews. Commentator Andy from Popcorn Planet raised the question a lot of people online seemed hesitant to say directly. Was Blake essentially left to absorb backlash meant to protect the larger Reynolds brand? To be clear, nobody's suggesting Blake is some flawless bystander in all this. She made plenty of missteps of her own along the way, a genuinely long list of them. Viewers still bring up those old press tour clips where she came across as cold or dismissive toward reporters. They still reference the aggressive early messaging around the lawsuit. They still point to the gap between how the case was originally framed and how quietly it actually wrapped up. They still remember how overly confident her camp sounded in those first few months of coverage. So this isn't a case of painting Blake as some innocent party caught in the crossfire, but a growing number of commenters online are starting to speculate about whether she and Ryan were ever truly operating on equal footing behind the scenes throughout all of this, based largely on the sentiment gap McPherson's analysis surfaced. Maybe Ryan never made a conscious decision to let Blake take the hit. Maybe his brand was simply powerful enough to absorb the same controversy without any of it sticking. But either way, the outcome McPherson's data points to is hard to ignore. Blake became the face of the scandal, while Ryan's brand barely seemed to slow down. And frankly, this kind of dynamic isn't unusual in Hollywood at all. People often forget that celebrity marriages function as much like business alliances as romantic partnerships. Reputation translates directly into income. Public image translates directly into income. Endorsement contracts translate directly into income. Box office pull translates directly into income. Reynolds is widely considered, by industry observers, one of the more bankable men currently working in entertainment. Few men in the industry right now carry his level of commercial appeal, and that pull extends across brand deals, studio backing, the sports world, and investor interest alike. Whether that commercial value played any role in how this specific saga unfolded is speculation, Not something either of them has confirmed, but it's the question a lot of online commentary keeps circling back to. What if Blake, consciously or not, ended up absorbing more of the fallout, partly because her husband's brand had more to lose financially? Andy raised a similar point in his own commentary, floating the idea that Blake may have understood early on that Ryan's public image carried more weight for their shared finances than her own did. None of that would be shocking if it turned out to be true. This kind of arrangement isn't unheard of in Hollywood, where one partner sometimes ends up absorbing public criticism while the brand around them stays intact. What can actually be documented is that the damage to Blake's public image ended up far exceeding whatever her team likely projected going in. This was never a fleeting wave of online chatter that would fade within a week or two. It stretched into months of sustained backlash where public sentiment, per McPherson's tracking, shifted sharply against her personally, not just against a business decision her team made. That's a difficult place to sit in, reputation-wise, because once audience sentiment shifts from disagreement into personal dislike, it tends to be very hard to reverse. It's exactly why this current image rehab feels rushed to so many viewers, because her team appears to be racing the public back into affection before people have had genuine time to emotionally process the scandal on their own terms. But modern audiences don't operate that way anymore. People clock a coordinated publicity push almost the second it starts. That's why every paparazzi shot, every camera-ready smile, every meticulously planned outfit moment keeps getting picked apart in the comments instead of celebrated the way it might have been years ago. Viewers aren't sensing authenticity in these appearances. They're sensing stage management, and audiences have gotten remarkably sharp at spotting that difference. And maybe that's the real miscalculation running through this entire saga, because the public tends to forgive genuinely chaotic, flawed celebrities all the time, especially when there's real vulnerability on display. What people can't stand, far more than scandal itself, is sensing they're being handled by a polished rollout that won't acknowledge what everyone already suspects happened behind the scenes. And according to McPherson, Andy, and a sizable chunk of the internet weighing in, that's precisely the misstep Blake's team keeps repeating, while Ryan Reynolds quietly exits the entire saga looking, at least in the coverage McPherson tracked, like the only person who walked away largely untouched. Thank you so much for watching. If this one kept you hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Clout Fallout so you don't miss the next update on this story.